Hi, I'm Justin McRoberts, host of the Etsy podcast. So welcome to the Etsy podcast. Usually with this podcast, what I'll do is I'll be taking questions usually from Instagram and then answering questions that are specifically directed at things that you are facing. And we'll usually do 3 or 4 questions in the direction of creativity or leadership or art making, religion. And this podcast, this one episode, we're going to do something just slightly different. I'm just going to hang out on this one question I got in multiple forms over the course of the last few weeks. And it's a question about overwhelm. So and being overwhelmed. In multiple facets, in personal conversations and messages from people, as well as like some of the Q&A from a couple weeks ago, some of what I got from a lot of what I heard from you was some version of I am overwhelmed and I don't know what to do. And I want to hang out here for a little bit because I think because if I'm hearing it as often as it seems to me, it's probably more pervasive than that, and I want to try to be helpful. So Here's some wonderings about overwhelm. First of all, I guess maybe an observation. It's really natural and very, it can feel humbling and be maybe even a little bit embarrassing and frustrating to feel so overwhelmed. I was talking with someone, in fact, this morning. It was a client who is really jammed up and is really bummed out that they cannot get motivated. They haven't been able to get motivated. They're humbled at how overwhelmed they are, and they're frustrated with themselves. So it's humbling. It can be a little bit embarrassing. It's also, I want to use the word natural here, but instead I'll say it's common. I think it's common for us to feel overwhelmed, which leads me to this observation and wondering. And I'm not, I'm not someone, I don't know the word, the person who said anthropologist, I'm not sure. I'm not adept at in the social sciences per se, but I wonder if we're just not designed, I'm using the word design here, I wonder if we're just not designed to live with and be responsible to take in and be responsible to the amount of information we take in and then are asked to be responsible for. And I've talked about this before. If you pay attention to the podcast, you know you've probably heard this theme. If you've read my books, you've definitely heard this theme. I wonder if we simply are not designed and therefore don't actually have the capacity as humans to take in at all, much less be responsible for the amount of information we're taking in and then being asked to be responsible for. It wasn't that long ago that to get from one side to the other of the country was pretty significant. Of the country we live in was a significant feat. Like that was like not that many generations ago. We're just like socially, emotionally not trained over the course of millennia to know what's happening on the other side of the world all the time, much less to have a sense of responsibility for it. Which brings me to the second part of this observation, this wondering. Part of what it means for me to know something, I wonder if my soul simply doesn't ever take in information, almost ever at all, as just pure data. If I know something, specifically if I know something is not right, if I know something is broken, if I know something is in fact wrong, if I'm aware of darkness and evil, I have a natural propensity to, because I'm designed this way, to want to care for it. We're going to talk about care again in a minute. I don't know that I ever really take almost anything in as just pure data and pure information. So when I bring in this amount, when I receive all of this information about what's going on in the world, my soul naturally responds by attaching itself to, as much as it possibly can, I want to take care of the world around me. It's how I'm designed. It's part of the thumbprint of the divine on human life is we don't just take in information. We actually want to care for what we know about. I wonder if there's just too much. As we do this is the second point here, like as we take in this information, again, a theme that I've brought to the table a few times, It's so important to recognize that the sources of this information aren't just passing along information. Even the intention behind the communication, almost no matter where you're getting it from, there's a story being told about what's important, and sometimes about who you are by the sources of the information. Like if you're being told about what's happening in a certain part of the world, decisions were made sometimes by persons, sometimes just by some random algorithm or something. Someone or something has made a decision about what's important for you to know. It's not just pure information. It's some form of propaganda. It's some form of storytelling. There is an intent to influence the way you think and you feel about the world around you and about your place in it. It's so important for you and I to recognize that we're not just being informed, we are being formed by the sources of information that we are giving ourselves over to. So, quick recap before we move on to a little deeper things. I wonder if we're not designed and trained evolutionarily or religiously or just emotionally at the base level to take in this amount of information and then be responsible to it. And we are not being simply informed. We are being formed by the sources of this information. So of course you feel overwhelmed. If you buy, as I do, the idea of resistance or darkness or evil, if you buy at all, the notion that there are forces in the world, that there are entities in the world that don't want you to flourish, then this next part is important. So if I want to get you off your tracks, if you've got a vision for your life, you come to a place in which like you're aware of what you're best at, you know what you love doing, and you find yourself constantly pulled out of that center by overwhelm. You're too overwhelmed to get to the things that you want to do or should be doing, the things you've decided like this is what you're best at. If I'm at all like trying to get you to not do what you're best at, I'm not going to try to come in your life and like sell you on like heroin use or like running illegal weapons across borders to equip terrible people. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to convince you that what you want to do, what you're designed to do, what's in your guts to do is not important. I'm going to try to knock you off your rails by distracting you with things that are more important than what you are naturally inclined to be up to. Now, what I'm not saying is that we're always right about those things. There are times, for sure, when it's important to get knocked off our horse like Paul was and be redirected. That I'm spending my time doing things that should, I should change my mind about. That's a really rare occurrence in an adult life. And the amount of times I talk to people nowadays who are overwhelmed and are not able to get to the things they care about, this is something else. This isn't people like reorienting themselves around like a deeper sense of justice. This is a whole lot of people distracted by wealth and not even a wealth, but by like a tidal wave of information and agenda. Some things in the world, this is my opinion, some things in the world do not want you to get to your business. If the goal and the hope is a world of fully flourishing people, then we don't get there without you. And you flourishing is actually part of what it looks like for shalom to happen, part of what peace or justice or equity, like a beautiful world includes a world in which you are getting to with your time, your energy, your money, the things that you are best designed to do and you're happiest in. And I know that's scandalous for a lot of people, but here's what I'm getting at is that's what we want for folks who have been oppressed and cast aside. What we're wanting for them is they should get to live out of the best of who they are without getting pressed down by someone else's agenda. Are there sacrifices that should be made by those of us who have more freedom to do that? Absolutely. But if that sacrifice reaches down to the part of my soul and steals from me my own deepest joys, and if I have to somehow become not a flourishing person in order to make flourishing happen for someone else, I think we've lost the plot. But that's the story that evil wants to say. That evil wants to tell you. I think that's what darkness and resistance wants to tell you is the things you are most deeply passionate about the things that actually matter to you, the things you're best at, don't matter. They are too small, and you should sacrifice those things and to throw yourself at this plethora of other things. I was talking with someone the other day, two great examples, talking with someone 3 days ago. These two conversations in one day. The one person was scheduled to take a sabbatical, to take 3 months off after working in ministry for it was 10 years without much of a break. And she quite literally said that with all that's happening in the world, the fires in Los Angeles and people murdering each other in the Middle East, I can't possibly bring myself to take this sabbatical. So what she's saying is, I cannot attend to my own well-being because there's so much else in the world going on. That's rough. And I understand. I understand that impulse. I understand. I think there's care in that. I think there's empathy in that. But I also think there's an absence of some wisdom. That a fully flourishing her is part of what makes the world a beautiful place. And if she doesn't take that sabbatical, she won't bring the best of herself to the works that she's designed to do. And someone else also the same week was talking about not having the emotional capacity to get to this work project. It's a beautiful idea. Because same reasons. There's so much else going on in the world. This just doesn't seem as important. I want to push back on that. And I want to say that we don't get to a fully flourishing human existence as a whole people if we don't take you with us. There's a story from a book. If you've read any of my books, there's a story I tell about my friend Bob, who traveled to India with a group of us. We were visiting churches that partnered with Compassion International, and Bob had brought with him this big white bag. No one knew what was in the bag for most of the days we were there. Second to last day, we walk into this church building, and there are about 350 kids who are in this program, sponsored by adults from all over the world. And Bob got really excited because he asked the pastor of the church, "How many kids are in this room?" And the pastor said 350, and he said, "That's perfect." So he went out and grabbed this bag. We were all very excited to find out what's in the bag. He tears it open. And before he left, Bob had purchased 350 or 375 of these bracelets that communicate this truncated version of the gospel of Jesus. And if you've seen it, there's bracelets with beads. And there's a black bead that represents sin. The red bead is the blood of Jesus. And it goes on and on and on. There's several beads. The yellow bead is glory, and the green bead is new life. And then it's all held together by this clear bead, which is the person of Christ. And Bob's idea was to communicate this to these kids. So he bought these bracelets. What he didn't know when he bought them is that they came disassembled. So he pulled out just bags of strings and bags of beads. At which point he kind of lost it, and he did what we do when we get overwhelmed. Is he did what some of us do when we get overwhelmed. Is he didn't slow down enough to think through what his best next steps were, and he just started talking and preaching and kind of apologizing. And this young woman who was part of the congregation, this young Indian gal, walks over and set her hand on Bob's shoulders and asked him for string and asked him for beads. And she went over in the corner, sat down, and looked at the paper. It was written in English, and she took her a long time to read the thing and figure out what it meant. She went to the bag, took out a few strings and a few bags of beads, and then knelt down in front of this one kid, this little 6-year-old girl. So this 12-year-old kid sitting in front of this 6-year-old girl, and she tells her to hold on to the thread. She takes out the black bead and places it on the thread, shows how to weave it through, and she tells her what the black bead means. And then she hands her the red bead. She tells her what the red bead means, and she keeps bead after bead, setting these things on, showing her how to put it on and explaining each piece. And it took forever until she handed her the clear bead and she showed her how to tie it. And then did the thing that I thought was mostly magical. Is she took out 2 threads and 2 bags of beads, handed them to this young 6-year-old girl, and told her to turn around. And this 6-year-old girl started talking to the 2 boys behind her, and explaining, this is the black bead, this is how you hold the string, this is the red bead. And that took forever too. And then she passed on strings and beads to them, and 1 became 2, became 4, It probably took 2 hours, maybe longer. But by the end of the 2 hours, every kid in the room had one of these bracelets on. They knew what it meant, and they had actually communicated this gospel of hope to every kid in the room. And we didn't get there because Bob gave in to his overwhelm. What Bob got the chance to do is because someone put their hand on his shoulder and said, "Hold on, take a minute," and then showed him, "Hey, don't try to get this all done at once. Like this, you want all of these kids to have this. You want to fix everything. I totally understand that, but you can't fix everything all at once because you're ill-equipped. It's enough to just take care of the little piece right in front of you, the little person right in front of you. It's enough to just do what you actually can do and then trust the rest of this to work out." So I want to be someone who sets my hand on your shoulder right now and says, you might feel really overwhelmed. And I get that. You probably should. I hope you do in some way. There's a lot happening and we're not being told the truth all the time. But I really want that to not mean, I really don't want that to mean that you stop doing what you were designed to do. I really don't want that to mean that you don't feel like it's enough for you to kneel down and take care of what's right in front of you. And that means two things. One is, again, a world absent of the things that you're uniquely designed to do is a darker world. We don't become a fully flourishing world without you being fully flourishing as well. And the other is this. When it comes to these moments, in the same way that I want you to develop patterns in which you are regularly investing in your art, in your business, and the things that you're designed to do, I want to help you if I can and encourage you if I can to make a regular pattern of care. One of the things that happens when the big news stories break and something awful becomes everything is guilt sets in because we haven't actually developed a pattern of care. We're not giving regularly. We're not caring for people. Right? We don't have a regular like monthly, weekly, like yearly like donation or sacrifice schedule. We're not like caring for people regularly. We haven't trained ourselves into that pattern. So I want to suggest both things. I want to suggest that in light of this overwhelm, maybe take a deep breath and don't give in to the overwhelm, but let it inform you. It's enough for you to take care of what's right in front of you. And that might mean that you can give $25 a month somewhere. It might mean that you actually can head down the road and take care of some people. It might mean that you actually go talk to your neighbor. All these things might sound small to you, but if you do your part, two things happen. One, it actually creates a pattern for you in which like when the big news happens, like you can look back and say like, I've been doing what I can do and not give in to guilt. But also creates a pattern of trust that someone across town is doing something else that you're not equipped to do and you're not called to do and you're not passionate about, but they're doing their part, and that's how we get there. We learn to trust that the goodness and justice and mercy actually do win out because there are good enough people in the world. It's one of the things the darkness wants you to believe is that like the darkness is going to win. This is what's most fundamentally real. But when we can actually slow down and pay attention, do the parts right in front of us, and let our souls get quiet, we can actually pay attention that someone else down the road, someone across town, someone else maybe on your feet is actually doing their part as well, and we can take some peace in that. So you may feel overwhelmed, and if you do, I hope this is helpful. And if you'd like to take some deeper steps into developing a life and a life pattern in which overwhelm doesn't wreck you for weeks, message me and let's make some time to work that out.